Yeah, I look at memory training like physical training, right? It's like saying I'm always going to be unfit. Well, we know that if you do physical training, you can get fit, right? So it's the same thing with memory. You can actually get your brain fit. And the results are, well, when we do physical training, we could see the results after a period of sustained effort, right? We might get bigger arms or shoulders or, biceps or whatever it is. But when you train your brain, it's not like suddenly your head just grows and you got a bigger brain, right? That doesn't happen. But the side effects are that you get creative, you get more imaginative, you can start to innovate more, and you could start to solve more problems because you're thinking a lot deeper.
Welcome to Season 2 of Voices of Value, a conversation between Peter Kakos and Rick Rushton and their high-achieving guests from professional sport, Olympians, business leaders, and ordinary people with value hacks to share through simple life lessons. If you're keen to reach your next level personally and professionally, sit back and join the conversation with your hosts, Rick and Peter.
And welcome to another episode of Voices of Value. This is Peter Kakos with, of course, my co-host, Rick Rushton. Rick, welcome to another big day.
What's your memory like, Pete?
Sorry, what?
What was that? Well, mine's pretty good in some real funky areas that has no economic return whatsoever. Like I can remember song titles and artists from the 80s. I can remember sort of the most stupid trivia. But ask A if she can tell you when the last time I knew where I left my car keys, because I'm always saying, where's my car keys? She will say to you, I do that quite regularly. So my memory is kind of a little bit patchy, but luckily we've got someone today who can help us through that, and our listeners and our viewers on YouTube through that, in terms of a 4-time Australian memory champion, Pete. He helps people globally as a memory expert. This guy, for fun, memorised 2 yellow pages back to back in 24 days and then recited them to the Australian media live to make sure it was all genuine, above board, no strings attached. Unbelievable. What that tells me is he's got to get out more, right? let's get a life, for goodness sake.
And for those listeners that don't know about the Yellow Pages, it's actually a book that's rather thick.
Yep.
With a collection of businesses and where to find them, their phone numbers, everything about that. So,
and our guest could recite that, which is interesting. But he does help professional organisations get better with their ability to communicate with their clients and their stakeholders without using notes. He helps presenters present without slides and notes again. Helps students this time of the year. Exams are everywhere. He helps students retain information for the purpose not just of the exam, but for the benefits of life going forward. Helps professional people, helps personal people like me work out where my keys are. He's also a TEDx speaker. He's the licensee of TEDx Docklands, which is where we first connected. And he's someone who just absolutely shares his knowledge and strategies on helping people remember things through his institute, the Tansel Institute, which we'll get into shortly. Go berserk studio audience for our guest, Tansel Ali.
Cool.
That's the studio audience.
Awesome.
Applause.
Thank you.
Do you like the production so far?
Tansel, welcome. I've got to say, it is incredibly exciting to have you on the show. And it's interesting when you talk about memory, it's what we all really strive for, isn't it? That better memory, to that ability to be able to retain information.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, Rick, what you said about, with students and so forth, and this time of the year especially, is their memories really really come to the forefront, don't they? And they are absolutely cooked. But Tansel, thanks for being on the show, and let's kick off by saying, where did it all start for you?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me on, Shane. So sorry, Peter. It's obviously great to be here. And
it's funny too.
It's great. Memory is one of those things where you don't realize you need it until you need it. So, when it comes to learning about memory, I was actually a big skeptic. So I never really believed in improving one's memory. In fact, I used to watch a lot of late night TV back in the day. And there was, shows like David Letterman. So I'd be up late at night watching them, and there'd be these memory gurus up on stage memorizing everyone's name. And I thought, these guys are all fake. They just want to sell their cassette tapes. It was back then. So, and I thought, I've got a shocking memory. How could they do it? So I thought it was all fake. And then a friend of mine came up to me one day and said, Tansel, I can remember 40 random objects back to front, any order. Well, I'm like, what? Like those guys on late night TV? And he goes, yeah. I'm like, yeah, right. Anyway, so I'm like, I have to test this guy out now. So gave him some words, and surely enough, he memorized them all perfectly when I tested him. And I didn't see him write down anything. I said, well, how did you do that? And he said, oh, it's easy, memory techniques. I'm like, well, what do you mean memory techniques? I mean, we weren't taught anything like this at school. Well, surely we would have known. And I said, where'd you get it from? He goes, oh, I got it from a book that I read. Oh, well, what's the book's name? And he couldn't remember. I'm like, you idiot. So anyway, I went and did some research, and there was a really powerful tool actually I came across this was back in 2002.
Yep.
And I used that, and it's called it's still around today. It's called Google, right? So you can
writing that one down.
Jot that one down.
Jot that one down,
Is that
because
two O's?
I think it's still being used, right?
Yeah.
So I Googled memory techniques, and guess what? Sites came up, websites showing you how to improve your memory. So did a bit of reading and researching, and came across courses and classes, and I thought, well, where's this been all my life? I was in my early mid-20s and started doing and practicing these skills. And then I said to my friend, look, let's train together. Let's see how far we go with this thing, because it's a bit of fun. We're using imagination. We're using our creativity. It's not memorization as in I'm just going to rote learn everything. It's a total opposite, and we'll probably talk more about that. But we started, working more and more and getting together and just having a laugh. And as I'm, Googling, I'll name that term as well, as we're Googling memory techniques, I came across the Australian Memory Championships. And I said to my friend, look, let's enter it. We'll come last. Who cares? we're two, guitarists playing in metal bands, What are, two bogans going to do at a memory competition? So we entered the competition, and I came second in Australia, and he came third, and we broke all his memory records. And I said to my friend, what the hell's going on? I've got a shocking memory, and here I am breaking memory records just by using memory techniques.
And how long was that after you read the book?
That was just within weeks, really, because it was just techniques. I mean, we were mucking around. We were making a lot of mistakes, but we were having fun with it.
Yep.
And it just turned out that other people weren't as good as well. So,
So was the bar low? Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, look, it's amazing what you can accomplish, even if you learn a little bit of the technique.
Yep.
So we're memorizing things like 78 words in 15 minutes.
Yep.
That's really low. But in reality, try doing that in 15 minutes, memorizing 78 words. I mean, it was quite remarkable what you can do.
I'm really interested in the fact that you actually said you had a bad memory, and then all of a sudden within weeks you had a great memory. So it's interesting. There's a label all of a sudden you put on yourself. So looking back, you'd say that you didn't have a bad memory. It was just like you didn't give yourself your mind a chance to memorize and so forth, all the skills, techniques. So could this be something that is for everyone? Anyone who's out there and says, look, I haven't got a great memory, and I always forgetting where I put things, or a list at the supermarket, I'm there scratching my head going, well, what did I need again? Those sorts of things. Are you saying this could be for everyone?
Yeah, I look at memory training like physical training, right? It's like saying I'm always going to be unfit. Well, we know that if you do physical training, you can get fit, right? So it's the same thing with memory. You can actually get your brain fit. And the results are, well, when we do physical training, we could see the results after a period of sustained effort, right? We might get bigger arms or shoulders or, biceps or whatever it is. But when you train your brain, it's not like suddenly your head just grows and you've got a bigger brain, right?
And you can see the reward for effort.
That doesn't happen. But the side effects are that you get creative, you get more imaginative, you can start to innovate more, and you could start to solve more problems because you're thinking a lot deeper. So they're the flow-on effects of having a better memory, but no one really thinks of that. They just think you got to either be born with it or you can't really work it. I mean, no one really improves their memory by doing crosswords and little apps and things like that. I mean, that's I don't really believe in all that stuff, but just direct access and what I call encoding of the brain. These are little strategies that once you start training them, really get you to a higher level.
So are we saying that there's no one who has a bad memory, they've just got bad processes in terms of how they first retain or store the information, retain it, and then go recall it and bring it back? Is that what we're talking about?
Look, mostly, I mean, there are medical conditions, obviously, you can have for, people having bad memory, but mostly it's a trained memory. Yeah. Once you start training it, then you can have something that's phenomenal. And what we think is phenomenal is, like memorizing the phone book. I mean, if we knew the techniques as kids, we'd be laughing at that now. You memorize the phone book. There's people out there memorizing libraries or, stuff like that. But we just think it's superhuman because we just weren't taught those techniques.
So there's a difference, isn't there, between like reading a book and so forth? Or I mean, I'm imagining there's a difference when you tell us, but you're reading a book and you're memorizing things like Yellow Pages or a phone book or whatever. Then there's the things that people actually tell you, like names, where they're from, where they're going on a holiday, what's their favourite drink, favourite colour, and all those sorts of things. Is that a different sort of a process in terms of what being able to restore what someone actually says to you, as opposed to just sort of reading it on a paper or reading a book and so forth?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I know you've done your research on this, so well done, good, well played. Yeah, look, it's pretty much a similar process, because when you look at information, right, really it's data. It's like zeros and ones, right? Like when a computer works, when it goes through cables and stuff, it's like zeros and ones, and once it gets in there, then there's encoding done, so by the end of it gives you an image. Right? So it's the same thing that happens with the brain, is when we look at data, whether it's names, whether it's other languages, whether it's what we read, it doesn't make sense until we create an image in our head and then tell a story. So story making is really the essence of memory, because stories connect. So for example, if I do meet another Peter, right, or meet yourself, for example, right? For me, that's an abstract name, right? In fact, most names are abstract. That's why people forget names a lot. But if you create an image, so imagine, I can imagine you with a head like a pita bread, right? I'll just say that, right?
Not a stretch, really.
Like pita bread. So I really imagine that, and people are tearing bits off your head just to eat the bread, right? Just silly stuff like that. That's what the brain remembers, because now I've made a little narrative from that image that I've created. So next time people see it, they go, hang on, why is his head like a pita bread? Oh, right, it's Peter. Right, so that's how the encoding process works, and the more you train your brain, the quicker you get at it.
And is that why people say, I'm terrible with names, but I'm really good with faces? Because visually they've remembered the face, but they can't link the name back to the face because they haven't created a story to it?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's been studies done as well where they've had people in front of images, and that about 98% literally recalled all those thousands of images. Yeah, so visually, it just encodes a lot better in our brain. That's why when we go to read a book, we always go back and reread. Why? Because we haven't created the images yet. But when we're watching a movie or something, we're not trying to remember the words, are we? We're just watching, we're not remembering the words.
Like, a lot of people say that. Like, have you read the book? No, but I'll just wait for it to become a movie because I'll retain it better there. Like, a lot of people think that, don't they?
Because it's in images and it tells a story. So you don't have to sit there trying to memorize everything. You're already taking it in. And that's why when I do show speed reading is essentially just encoding the words into images. And because you're seeing the images, you just naturally read faster now. So it's not about moving your finger faster or just moving your eyes faster. It's just a way of encoding.
Yeah, so it's not like the individual words like fox and rabbit and horse. It's like the rider was on the horse chasing the fox. He jumped over, and you're imagining the story, so therefore you retain it. There was a speaker, Pete, called Glenn Capelli back in the 90s. I'll never forget that. He put up a random amount of words, like 40 words. How many could you retain? And I remember thinking, okay, I'm competitive, so I'm ready to do this. So I'm trying to remember, and I'm just remembering, going across the lines. When it came time to divulge it back down again, I could remember about maybe 8, 10, 12. Then when you said, why don't you make a story of the words? And I remember picturing the house, and there was a door, and there was a flower, and there was a flower pot. And I was thinking a rake in front of it. And then I could almost double it. And I think that was the technique that you're talking about there, Tansel. Just have a visual story behind the words, and then you'll retain a lot more. But, I'm always baffled by people that can go, I've met 300 people and I can recite their names. This is Peter, this is Emma, this is their daughter Olive, this is their son Oscar. Like, how do they do that? And you're getting back to that, create a story around 300 names as opposed to just meet 300 people and try and cram those sort of names into a short-term memory, which isn't designed for that.
Absolutely. And it's actually easier to remember more information as the person gives it to you, because you can now extend on that story. So if they say the name's Bob, I can imagine someone bobbing up and down consistently, right? And they say, they're an accountant. So they're bobbing up and down doing someone's taxes, and their daughter's name's Ollie or something, and my cat's name's Ollie. So I can imagine, a cat jumping up on that and guys, crack or something or whatever. I mean, you can just make up some silly story, right? So all you're doing is connecting. So next time you see that person, Bob triggers, and then Bob triggers, Ollie and everything else from it. So,
but what do you do there? So say you remember all that information, right? And then you regurgitate it back. Do you just then dump? Is that a file you dump out of your brain and you don't think of it 5 minutes later, let alone 5 months later or 5 years later? Is that how it works for you? Or
no, it's a really good question, because if you want to retain something for long term, you got to sort of go back at some stage as well. Because if you just leave it, and if the story's weak, because that's what training a memory is, it's training it so that you do make a really good story, so you don't have to keep going back, right? But if you want retained names for a longer period of time, let's say you meet someone, you might go back with that story that you made maybe a couple of hours later, and then maybe the next day saying, "Hi, I met this guy. Here's a story," right? So you keep doing that. It's called spaced repetition. So whenever you're going to memorize something, you do it, say review, say 2 hours later, and then do 24 hours later, a week later, 2 weeks later, and you sort of double it, and that's the process there.
So is that stuff? Sorry, Pete. Is that stuff where they talk about people that have been abused in their childhood, as an example? And I don't want to make light of that, because that's a pretty challenging scenario. But they say it's hard for counsellors to move them on, because their story they've told themselves and they've retained it so vividly for so long. It's very hard for them to spatially move forward until they actually deal with that story. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
there?
absolutely. I mean, the story is really, once it's got emotion in there, then we really remember it. So when I train people, I train them to first improve visually their imagination, and the next step is to add emotion in there. So once you start adding emotion, then you really can't forget. So those instances where there's trauma involved, that's massive, stories inside, and emotion and everything like that. And you can't necessarily create a better story, because nothing's going to be as big as that. But there are certain techniques to sort of move it along, and that's why counselors and psychologists, and they have their own sort of methods.
Gee, that goes down a whole different path, doesn't it? That's really, really powerful. What about numbers, Tansel? Are there stories around numbers and things like that? Because you're retaining like decks of cards as well, aren't you?
Yeah. It's all the same thing, because numbers are abstract, just like words, they're abstract. So what we do is we create images for the numbers, right? So, and you could do single digits. We do pairs of digits, but I'll just give you an example. So single digits might be 0 might look like a donut, right? Number 1 could be a pen. Number 7 could look like the edge of a cliff, or it could be a nose or something like that. So when the numbers come up, you just make a story with the numbers, right? And that's really the way to do it.
So could we go to Crown and sort of break the bank? Could we play blackjack and count the deck? Could we be Rayman?
Are you a Lethal Weapon?
Is this Rayman meets Crown Melbourne? Could we do that?
I mean, how do you think I made my money? No.
Okay. We might cut that out, Dom, just in case anyone's listening from the ATO. But is that what they do? Is that what card counters do?
No, card counters have their own system. So they have this plus or minus thing going on. I don't know if you've seen the movie 21, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, what we're saying there is that there's coding, and you can turn numbers into donuts. I'm having a great memory there.
So I was watching something on YouTube that you did, and let's talk about the yellow pages, for example, because I'd imagine there's a whole lot of things to remember there. And so if we can just sort of step through a process, for example. So there's a business, there's a name of a business, and it's a phone number. Could you give us an example of a story that you've created around something?
Sure. So let's take, for example, Jim's Mowing, right? Yep. So I imagine Jim. Now, when I think of Jim's Mowing, that's the business name, and then there's a telephone number. So that's what I had to memorize. This was a PR company that contacted me, by the way. So they said, memorize the phone book. And I almost said no. I almost turned them down. And I thought, well, I did the basic calculations, and I thought, I might be able to pull it off. So
it was about 30 seconds each ad? Is that what
I tried to essentially say, okay, what's the longest it's going to take me to memorize an ad, and then multiply that by, I went and reviewed it 8 times over the yellow pages. So, the
whole thing. How many pages?
It was over 2,300 on each. Each book. And it was a Sydney yellow pages. So
it's not like familiar territory for you.
Melbourne was tiny compared to Sydney. So they really gave it to me. But in terms of the process, so what I do is I try to create a really strong visual for Jim's Mowing. Right. And so I'd, look at the picture that it has on the Jim's Mowing, the dude with the beard, and, the trailer maybe, because that's what comes to my mind. I think of Jim's Mowing. Okay, that's Jim's Mowing. And then I look at the number, and I use my own system for numbers. So I remember in pairs of digits. So, 17 could be a dog, or 71 could be a cat. And this is using a technique called the major system, where you substitute letters for numbers, right? So 7 could be a k sound, and 1 could be a T. That's why I've come up with cat. Right, so I'd look at the numbers, and it might be 97127177, something like that. So 97's a bike, right? So I'd picture a bike, being, ridden up the trailer, right? And then all the other numbers follow through as a story. So essentially that's what I did. And in competition, we do them within seconds, right? But I thought I'll just go really slowly, make the story really, really crazy. And then I think that'll put me in good stead. And I reviewed it quite a bit as well. So I think that's what really solidified it for me.
It's like the imitation game, isn't it? It's like he's a code breaker, just created his own code that you understand, so your brain retains it.
It's not my code.
No, I get it, but like you've been able to drill yourself, immerse yourself in the technique, make it a skill, and then just use it for good, clearly, not for harm, for good, which is important. Talk to me about short-term versus long-term memory, because, a lot of kids that are cramming for exams at the moment, or someone who, a parent who's got a wedding speech to make or something this coming Saturday, or, they start, getting really sort of trying to remember, is the word the or that, and they get so insular about each word that they fail to chunk, and they fail to probably have the main sort of stories. But I think my analogy that I heard once that I'll share with you is that it's a bit like trying to stuff raincoats and jackets into your sock drawer. It's really hard to sort of get that long-term memory into a short-term file. Does that sort of have any sort of resonation with you?
Yeah, what generally happens is when we try and remember something, and this is what we're taught at school really, we're not even taught at school, is you just repeat stuff, rote learning and try and get it in there. But what happens is that it's got no location to go to. So it's, gets up into the cloud, right, in your head. So it's just swimming around. So it's like saying, you telling me, just come to our office, right, but not telling me where it is, right? So that's what you do in real life. But when information goes in, you don't ask where it goes. So you just try and find it in there. And when you haven't found it, you go back and repeat. So what was it again? What was it again? So that's why the short term, it goes into our short-term memory when we first try and memorize, but short-term memory wasn't designed for that. It was only designed for like remembering where we parked our car or left our keys, things like that. And we still get that wrong, right? So the trick is to be able to put holding spots into your brain, almost like folders on a computer.
Yep.
Right. So when you got folders on a computer, then you can file the information away and just walk away. And then when you want to get to that information, you know where that folder's stored. Right. So the trick is to be able to do that. And that can also retain in long-term memory. So when I work with a lot of people, especially doing their postgrad or medical students, I get a lot of law students, and they're sitting there, the bar exams and medical exams, and it's about creating those holding spots, the folders in their head, and then putting the information in, whenever they need it, they can just extract at any given point in time.
So they train the pathway to find it? Is that what you do? Do you help them?
I train them to memorize, so create the pathway to get into that storage location, and obviously show them how to put those folders in there, like the method you were mentioning before about the gate and all that. So that's called the method of loci that the ancient Greeks used to use, and it's also called memory palace now. It's a more sexier term these days, but so it's techniques like that really help. But I mean that's just memory techniques. Usually those things we do last when studying. So studying really deals with a lot of information. So first thing that you need to do is you need to organize that information, because if information's organized, it's a lot easier to tackle. So it's like, imagine there's dots all on the whiteboard, right? And they're scattered everywhere. And if I told you to count how many, you might sort of have a guess, right? But if I put those dots in order, you'll just look at the rows and say, okay, that's 12 or that's 20. Right? So that's what organized information does. So when information's organized, then you can say, okay, here's what I need to learn. Here's what I need to study. Here's what I need to memorize. Here's what I need to apply. So it makes learning a lot easier as a structured process, rather than I'm just going to memorize anything, because even that is just counterproductive, because you'll be wasting energy.
So how important is chunking when you're doing that? When you've got all that information and you can chunk them into bites that are easy then to put into the files that you want to recall later on.
Yeah. Oh, look, absolutely vital. I mean, if you're just putting one bit of information, you're going to have a lot of folders. But if you get a chunk together, and it could be something in context, or it could be a group of information that's related, then it's easier to recall all that because it's all in one spot. So yeah, very, very powerful method.
You were talking before about rote learning. So how does that differ from the sort of stuff that you're talking about there?
Yeah, rote learning is just pretty much just repetition. Like we look at something and we repeat it over and over again, and we read over and over again, and when we expect it to get inside our head. Now, yes, granted, that works to some extent, but when we get to recall that information, right, during, I guess, time, when time passes by, we lose bits and pieces, so we don't get everything in there. When you do the memory locations or when you store that information, everything goes in there, and everything that you essentially want to remember goes in there, so you'll never miss anything essentially. So a lot of people that I work with, they've ended up getting 100% in their exams, because they've able to store everything in there. And that's what we do in memory competitions is we can't afford to make any mistake whatsoever. If we do, instead of coming first, we come last.
Wow.
So the scoring system is really, really strict. So when we memorize, it's essentially for perfect recall.
Yeah. What would your techniques be for someone who forgets where they put things like keys, wallet, just general things on a day-to-day basis where it's like, oh, where did I put that? Or
Which is the majority of our listening and viewing audience.
I'm just channeling the listeners out there.
I get that. Not you, because you're very organised. Emma?
So what would your techniques be?
I guess the first technique is for people to subscribe, because they have to remember to obviously watch shows like this.
Yep.
So that's the I said it. See, you've got it in your notes. Yeah, tick that on your notes. So essentially, it's all about learning and education. Right, they need to be able to get into it. They need to be able to read the books. They need to be able to understand that there are techniques out there that work. Right. So what I do is essentially if it is something like keys or something I got to remember, usually it's almost mindless, right? We just pop our keys on the table and walk away. And then we say, oh, where's our keys, hun? We're walking around and you look everywhere, you can't find it. And then, that's that, right? So you get frustrated. So the trick to be able to remember things like that is make the story when you're actually putting down those items. So for example, if you're putting the keys on the table, imagine the keys getting bigger and bigger and heavier and breaking the table or something, like that. So next time you're walking around the house, you walk past a table, hang on, why'd the table break? And you look down and the keys have fallen or something like that. So it's just making that story a connection. So as we spoke about before, it's not just the imagery, but the story. And if you add emotion, wow, that's another level there.
And if you add emotion around that, because I lived with my brother when I was 15, and when I was starting to learn how to drive, I'd be using his keys, and then when it came time for him to need the car, he'd go, where'd you put the keys? And I'd go, I don't know. I couldn't remember it, and I'd have to go think about where I put the keys. And I had a real bad track record in my teenage years of forgetting where I left my wallet and my keys. But I could remember song titles and artists, which was stupid, but couldn't remember something tangible like where's the keys. And then we'd be looking, and then I go, oh, I found them. And he'd go, where were they? And I go, the last place I looked. He goes, exactly, because if it was the first place you looked and you kept on looking, you'd be an idiot. And he was just saying to me, your process is stupid. And I remember thinking, maybe he's onto something there. Maybe it's not my memory's bad, because I've got a good memory, I think. I can remember stuff and retain stuff. I'm really good with names. And because if I get introduced to somebody and say your name was Craig, I'm shaking your hand, I'm looking, and I'm saying the word Craig, but I'm picturing my brother-in-law on your shoulder. So when I see you again, I see that. So I can remember names pretty well with faces because I've done that. And I'm thinking, maybe that's just a little bit of coding that I had that no one really taught me, but I just did it. So I started doing that with things like keys and wallets and things like that. So what you're saying is create a story, make it almost like a cartoon story, which makes it even more, your brain's going, I better pay attention here because this doesn't seem real. So it creates it as real, and then you've got a better chance of retaining what's going on.
Yeah, and Craig's my cat's name as well, so that makes it a lot easier.
So it's an easy one. Yeah, well, had I known that, now I'm picturing a cat every time I see a Craig.
Names is a biggie, isn't it? Because
it is.
To use someone's name is one of the most powerful things you could do. It's,
Great point.
It's that instant sort of connection.
Yep.
And so understanding, and I'd just love to, we're all about hacks here, Tansel. I'm picturing now someone at a dinner party or at a function, and you're meeting multiple people. You've just met 12 people in the last 5 minutes, and it's like, and some people, and I can hear them now saying, I meet someone, they say their name, gone, like in an instant. How do you frame up, let's go to that picture that yourself in a party. And I know you said, Peter, the pita bread and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Can we do a bit of example and reel off about, let's say 10 names of a typical story? What Tansel at a dinner party, or Tansel at a function? step us through how you go about that.
Yeah, sure. The first thing that I do, and this is something, I've picked up from other memorizers and colleagues and stuff as well, because, we're a bit of a group and team and help each other out, which is great, is, always prepare yourself to, before you get into that environment is, okay, I'm going to remember names, try and get in that mindset. Because, you're going to have to remember these names. So once you get into that mindset, it's almost like you're, turning on the switch.
So loosening the hammies of your mind, just doing a bit of a stretch.
Do the stretches. You do the stretches and all that sort of stuff. Maybe if you see a pole and you can start doing you do stuff. You do your stretches and then you get in and,
flick the switch.
You're ready to make stories in your head and say, okay, I'm ready. As soon as they say a name, bang, I'm into it. And if they give me any more information, bang, I'm going to try my best.
So let's meet the first person.
So just before that, can I just say that, Rick, because I think this is really important, and you said to yourself, I'm crap at memory. I've got, the memory, back in the early days. Would that be one of the first things to say, give yourself a break and say, well, no, I haven't been able to sort of retain and restore and so forth. I'm going to be open to this, and here I go. So that's part of the stretching, isn't it? To say, give yourself permission. The inner dialogue, and give yourself permission to sort of, okay, here I go. I'm in learning mode.
Yeah, and if you do forget, we're human at the end of the day. Even I've forgotten. Even I've forgotten. And I've said to her, sorry, I've forgotten your name or whatever. I can't remember the last time that happened, but when it does happen, and people go, hang on, but you're the memory guy. And it's like, yeah, I'm human as well.
I thought I made a mistake once, but I was mistaken. I was just a little bit not quite right.
But I do get a lot of people come to me and say, oh, do you remember me? And I was like, no, are you important? What? they freak out. So it's funny. The reverse actually has a really cool effect.
And when John Howard heard that, I was only Prime Minister of Australia for 11 years, but you don't remember me. That's fine. So I think Pete's point is valid. So
let's go back to that.
In the party, and I want to know how you do it with a name like Craig. Clearly, Kat.
Yeah.
What happens if it was a real a Scandinavian name that you've got no real reference point for, like some real radical name that you've never heard before,
like Stefan?
No, Stefan, you can think of a tennis player, I think, but I'm thinking of something that's like a real hard to pronounce, hard to even remember name. I want to know how you do that one too.
We might have to consult the Google.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's a term you came up with, I know, Google. But how do you do it? What's so
look, you break it down. Like an example I give is I used to work with a guy named Vijay Rangadamachandran.
There we go.
Right? And you're thinking, and I'm thinking, okay, how do you? Yeah, I hope he's watching, by the way. Awesome guy, beautiful moustache. So what I do with that name is I break it down. So I think VJ, okay, DJ, right? Orangan, I think an orangutan. Or my daughter's got red hair, so a little rangan, maybe, ranga. And then Rama, I think of maybe drama or something. So I'm just making images at this stage.
Yeah.
And then Chandran, I think of maybe chundering or something. It means vomiting in Australian
slang.
Right? Slang. So you've got a DJ, orangutan, drama, and chundering. So all you got to do now is connect the story together in sequence. So you got this guy with a beautiful moustache. He's DJing at a nightclub, right? Suddenly orangutan jumps on him, causes all this drama at the nightclub, but everyone's just chundering as a result, right? So can you recall that name from the start, from that story?
Yeah. So Vijay Ramachandra. Yeah.
Ramachandra. Yeah, we can. Kind of. We didn't say it very well. Yeah. We might not have had quite the Sri Lankan slang on it, but we got it. No, we didn't get it? Is that what you're saying? I thought we got it.
I don't know. You both said it really quick. Can you say it again, maybe one by one, so we can test it out?
Vijay Ramachandra.
Vijay Ramachandra.
VJ. Think of the story. Think of the story.
Yes, orangutan. Yeah. And the drama and the chanda. So it's
Vijay Ramachandra.
Yeah, Vijay Rangan Rama Chandran.
I wasn't listening.
Okay, I think
but if my song titles and artists from the 80s, I'm all over it.
What about this song?
If we converted that into a song, you'd remember it.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to the party.
Yeah, we're at the party.
Yeah, we're at the party.
So Vijay Ramachandra.
Because it's interesting, and the reason I ask this, Tansel, is it's when you're, like, for example, a lot of our listeners are real estate people, and there's an open for inspection where you could have 10, 15 or 20 people through, okay? Then all of a sudden that second or third group come back to you after everyone else has left, and it's like, whoa, okay, you were Dennis?
Yeah. Or even worse, you meet them at a 12 to 12:30 open, and then you don't see them again till about 4 to 4:30, and you see them come up, and then you go, how you going? Hey, you. I've got your details, of course. I just need them for this register. Yeah, my name is. Oh, of course, that's right, DJ.
I know I've got your details. I'll just write it again.
I'm just going to write it again anyway. So how do you do that one?
Yeah, it's very, very important, isn't it? Because their role is to connect with people on a deeper level and make them feel important. And it's not just about being able to remember the name, which is the window. It's about being able to really understand and care for them. And so it goes on a deeper level. I used to do a lot of this stuff with, in real estate, and because it's so important to have that connection. So again, you're still doing one by one each person, but you still have to have a trained memory, because if you don't have a trained memory and get into all this name stuff, it's going to take you ages to create that story. And then a new group comes along, a new person comes along. Right. So that's a difficulty when starting out with names, is that the story making ability is, and especially if that person's not creative, they're going to take a longer time to make that story. So, for tips like that, I suggest definitely training your memory. It doesn't take that long, but the more stories you make, the better you get at that. And when you do come across names, right, you can create the image and use it as a template. So all the Craigs I meet are cats. Right, all the Pauls I meet are Poles. Right?
It's funny you should say that, because when you meet someone and then you instantly say, "Yeah, my first dog was named that," or my auntie's Budgie is called that, or whatever it may be. Yeah,
I try not to say that to people, but only to Craigs, because it's funny how they look similar as well to the cat. So maybe they've all come from morphed into one.
Well, I remember walking down a street in Sydney, and there was this one of those little pugs walking along. It's tiny, and I said, "Oh, beautiful dog. What's its name?" And he said, "Ian." I'm like, "Yeah, no, I can't picture that." Yeah. But anyway, every time I see an Ian now,
you picture
a little
that.
pug dog.
Yeah. Tansel, as a kid growing up, we used to play a card game, brothers and sisters. We would just get pairs, and we put them out on a grid. And I'd always attack the game really strategically. So I'd memorize the first left corner, and then I'd go to the bottom. I'd sort of strategically go around it, and then I could clean house after about 3 or 4 goes of turning around, because I could remember where things were. And my sisters would go, "Bloody hell, you're a freak at this game." And I'm thinking, no, I was just following a process. Is that what I'm hearing with what you're talking about? It's not you have to have a freakish memory. You just got to have a process that allows your memory to shine. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's exactly what your brother said to you when you couldn't remember the keys. You got a crappy process.
Yeah.
So once you have that process, it's just a system, and then the techniques actually add on top of that. Yeah, so when I actually work with people, it's not because they have a bad memory or they don't know the techniques. It's because they don't know how to use it. They don't have a system in place. So when they do go out and meet a lot of people, well, you need a system for that. You can't just go and make a story for each person. You got to have a plan of attack. You got to have a strategy. I've actually worked with a lot of football clubs as well, and when they go and try to memorize, say, plays or structures, they don't really have a system. So when I've sort of sat down with them, say, look, here's a system to get the new guys versus the guys that know it off the top of their head really well to connect this and synthesize this information. But it's not just using a technique. You need a whole process in place. So that's what I do. I'm essentially a problem solver. I look at people's, challenges or problems, and I create systems around it with the memory technique. So that's how I approach it.
And if someone wants to meet you in person, obviously they will have the links on this to the Tansel Institute, which is something that you sort of are really passionate about, working with people in their sphere and what their challenges are and helping them solve that. But you've also got 2 best-selling books as well, which people could access fairly well, The Yellow Elephant and How to Solve Anything in Virtually 48 Hours, which I think is an interesting title alone. So we'll make sure the links are to those particular books. Is there anything you could give our listening audience that you would go, as Pete says, a hack that they can leave this episode with and go, I'm going to give that a go right now and get some, maybe some low-hanging fruit, something that I can get a reward for pretty quickly and go, this intrigues me enough to want to know more about this Tansel guy, or this intrigues me enough to want to get the exercises going so my brain is trained around this. Is there anything you can sort of share with our audience that they can sort of do straight away?
Yeah, look, I can actually give them 4 things.
Here we go. Well, that's the way we are here at Voices of Value. We're value added.
we have to. There's no mucking around. So when it comes to memory, it's once you start getting the results, you just want more of it. And that's what I guess inspired me, if I can get that out. That's what inspired me to keep moving forward, because I was able to do what I can do. I was like, imagine what I can do for other people. So, hopefully if people do get this information, they can really make the most of it and not just help themselves, but help others as well. So what they can do is I'm happy to give them the first book that I wrote, The 4 Most Powerful Memory Techniques. So all they have to do for that is go onto my website, tanselali.com, and they can essentially download that for free, right? And that's I put that on the. There used to be an ebook online on the Android store and iOS store years ago, about 10 years ago, and we had over 100,000 downloads internationally, and about 10,000 overnight on the iOS store. So it went absolute bonkers when it first came out, and now I'm just sort of making sure that people have access to it, because the techniques there, you've got your number rhyme technique, you got your memory palace that we talked about, the journey technique, and you've got others in there like, remembering keys and stuff like that. So, and it only takes about 15 minutes to read as well, because I've made it.
TanselAli.com.
TanselAli.com.
TanselAli.com, and we'll have the link on both the sites and the YouTube channel as well.
What I'm loving is hearing about the processes and the strategies and all that sort of stuff, and also the training that sort of needs. I think, and I must say I'm guilty of this as well, as thinking that there's got to be a quick fix. There's got to be something. Come on, just give me something. It's got to be this quick fix. But everything we do in life is about a process and a structure and a strategy, isn't it? And it's about the learning and taking the time to actually learn. This is what memory is about. Memory is no different than a bicep. You're not going to get a bicep straight away, or a six-pack straight away. You have to work for it. Exactly right.
But people think memory, there might be a quick fix or injection or something like a pill or whatever. But it's not. It's simple techniques. Now, the techniques are simple. It's how you make it work. Really, it's up to you. And you can take it as high as you want, or you can use it for something basic. There's all different levels. Yeah.
And then what you find that people try and do is say, I'll try and create my own method. I'll try. But there's actually proven methods that actually work. So
why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. But again, it's people trying to speed up, and there's no shortcuts to any place worth going. So it's taking the time, doing the work, but knowing that there's people like you in the world that have been so incredibly torchbearers, in fact, in leading the way in terms of memory and how to do it.
Yeah. I feel we have to be. I feel we have to be, because I feel like if I don't pass this knowledge on, it's just absolutely useless for me, because it's no good for me personally, but it's great for everyone, because this is stuff that needs to be shared. There's people out there that's struggling to present. So once they know these techniques, now they can present powerfully without notes. They can do their pitches perfectly. They could do all sorts of cool stuff. And for me, that's really rewarding. Like last year, I trained up about half the speakers for TEDx Docklands, and they came to me with 4 or 5 pages of script. I said, what the hell are you doing? Tear them all up and say, look, from those 5 pages, I picked out 6 things you can talk about. Right, because 1 or 2 paragraphs really summed up their introduction, right? So memorize introduction, memorize this, memorize that. Yes. They memorized 6 points, and they got up on stage and they recalled everything perfectly. But not only that, they didn't have to keep trying to remember. Now they could focus on creating an impact from their knowledge. And that's what really matters, creating that impact, not just being able to remember. And same thing with knowledge. We don't want to just store knowledge for the sake of it. We want to do something with that knowledge, right? So that's why I say to people, we're not really in the information age anymore. We can Google stuff now, right? So it's what we do with that information, how we create an impact, how we create I guess, a result from it as soon as we can. So that's what memory allows us to do.
And so, memory isn't remembering dates in history. It's remembering the lessons from those dates, so that we actually progress from that and don't make the same mistakes, which I think is what our kids need to learn at schools. And you're right, none of this was at school, but I think it's getting better, but it's a long way to go. But you're very, very good at sharing your information. Again, TanselAli.com is where you can go to get effectively the 4 hacks there that are involved in the Yellow Elephant for free. It's a free download. And again, if you want to connect with Tansel, that's very easy to do through his website, and he's running regular programs. He's doing them in-house for organisations. He's working with elite organisations that want to message themselves better to their stakeholders, whether that be internal or external. He's working with students that are trying to tick off every box at exam times, not just high school VCE, but we're talking people doing their doctorates and masters in sort of things. He's working with elite sports groups in understanding structures. So he hasn't worked with the North Melbourne Football Club yet, obviously, Pete, but he's working with the elite sort of groups there. This is a man who is so willing to share his information because, like everyone listening to this here at one stage, he probably told himself, I'm not very good with memory. Yet he realised he had a pretty good memory if he allowed his process to be improved in line with his memory, which I think is really where it's at.
Rick, I just wanted to say, and as we start to sort of wind up here, but Tans, I've got to say I could talk to you for another hour and keep testing you. But I'm really loving just thinking about you. There's a real message in a metaphor, isn't there? Isn't that what metaphors are all about? It's creating a story and a visual around it. And I look now at PowerPoints and so forth. It is really about the imagery, and it's suddenly something's really triggered over the last sort of several years of you go to a presentation, there's a lot of visual stuff now.
Less bullet points, more visuals.
Exactly right. Death by PowerPoint is around all this sort of script on there as opposed to, but great presenters are actually showing a visual and creating a story around it that's helping. So I think now, and as you've been speaking here today, things are certainly going off in my mind. It's like the little triggers, and it's pretty damn exciting, I've got to say. In terms of,
death by PowerPoint's very common, right? Even at universities. And when I look at these death by PowerPoint examples, it's just abstract presented at you, right? So it doesn't leave your brain to encode anything. But as soon as they start involving images, then your brain goes, okay, maybe I can make sense of this. And as soon as they start telling a story or start creating more images in your head to connect you with that data, that's when you get it, right? So it makes sense. And now I'm seeing a lot of people now with their titles of storyteller, right? Because it's getting more and more popular. Why? Because it's connecting.
I love that.
It's connecting with people.
And that's all over LinkedIn at the moment, storyteller, visual storyteller.
But TED Talks have been great like that, haven't they? I mean, TED Talks are, what do you see most 20-minute TED Talks, and you've probably got maybe 2 or 3 slides or something like that.
And a lot of content.
And a lot of content and a lot of stories. They sort of hit you as soon as the time they come out, they create that story in your mind. All of a sudden, then a journey starts, doesn't it?
Well, all three of us have been to a lot of conferences over the years, and I'm seeing now when I see a content-filled bullet point slide, all I see is every individual in the audience just do this. They just grab their phone, they click the slide, and then they disengage again.
Yep.
And I'll go, I'll retain that later. It's just too much information to even look at now. But when someone tells a story, you see the phones go down, you see them really engage, and if we think about from antiquity through to modern era, a lot of the fundamentals were passed on from generation to generation through storytelling, wasn't it?
Exactly.
We understand that's how, before there was a coded sort of alphabet, before the ancient Mayans, people were in around the campfires and just explaining to the next generation, here's where we've come from, here's what we value, here's where we're heading, and you're going to help us pass on that sort of that gift to the next generation. So I think that's really critical. One of the things that Tansel does do, Pete, which I'm sure you're aware, but for our listening audience and our viewing audience, is he is actually passionate about sharing information, so much so that he is the license holder of TEDx Docklands, which was an event I had the great fortune of speaking at through Tansel's kind invitation in February of 2019. It's on in 2020. It always sells out, doesn't it? And we've got maybe some opportunities for some of our listening audience to buy a ticket. It's not like you have to really go and crack the credit card out there. It's you hold it at a really good venue that makes it affordable for everybody, don't you?
Oh, look, we sold out in a couple of weeks, to be honest. It was insane. And that was before people even knew who the speakers were.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, unfortunately, we can't show who the speakers are.
Yeah, I did. I nabbed him there because I said I need some feedback on whether it was any good.
No, it turned out really good. But we can't put the presenters up obviously because people pull out last minute, so we want to disappoint people as well. So it turned out really well. I mean, to be honest, I'm not really a big TEDx fan. Yeah. Right. A lot of people think, oh, you must be because you're involved in TEDx, and I'm like, when I was filling out the application, it said, oh, what are your top 3 TEDx talks? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't watched any. So I had to go out and watch some and just enter him in the application, because for me, it's all about getting some amazing people in there and, seeing the impact they have on that audience in the world, because we had a couple of the videos that went online had 10,000 views every night, every single night from all over the world. I mean that's just insane. So and their message just got out, and people are talking about it, and they know about these things. So and there's mental health, and there's all these other amazing topics that were brought to the fore. So I'm really grateful to be involved and to be able to meet people like Rick and yourselves and from it. So thank you.
And so TEDx Docklands 2020. What's the actual date?
So TEDxDocklands.com is the website. February 20 is the date, and we usually have it at the library at the docks there.
Yep. Ticket prices?
Ticket prices are $100.
Yep.
So I think that's the max we can have anyway. Yep. But like I said, they usually sell out.
It's an absolute
$100 for 12 amazing speakers. So what, $12 a speaker to get amazing information. I mean,
it's a bit like a box of chocolates, isn't it? You never know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of it, is there's such variety.
Absolutely, and you can sort of sit in an audience and immerse yourself with like-minded people. That's the other thing. I mean, the feedback I got from this year's one was how many people didn't know each other until they went there and then connected, and then they started sort of broadening their networks really because of that sort of opportunity. So it is a great opportunity.
What I realized was you watch the TED Talks, but you only see the talk. But when you go to the event, it's such an experience. That you think, wow, this is unbelievable, where, people come together and they network and you have fun little games together, and there's a lot that happens that you just don't see at a talk. Like, I don't know if you were there, but one of our speakers, the alarm went off at the library. So we had to cut it short. And just before it went off, he was talking about pattern interrupt.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's talking about pattern interrupt, and then the alarm goes off. So we all had a good laugh. And,
he was an actor, so he was good into improv.
It couldn't have happened
the right guy. It was the right guy if it was going to happen to, which I think is critically important. But anyway, there's the opportunity, 20th of February at the Docklands Library. Tansel Ali is our guest. If this is helping you, imagine how it could help your network. So please make sure that you share the content here. Make sure that you subscribe to never miss an episode, because we are passionate about bringing thought leaders like Tansel to the microphone, to the video camera, and giving as much value-added content as we possibly can. Tansel, it's been an absolute delight from our end. The amount of people who are telling me, can't wait to hear this one. It was really out there when we sort of just flagged that it was going to be happening this week. And so for you to come into our little humble HQ, Voices of Value HQ, and sort of share your memory hacks is something that we don't take lightly or for granted. We really appreciate it. And it is something that everybody needs, especially in this social media day where we're training our brain for shortcuts, and we're almost training our brain to get rid of information, not to retain it, to have the ability to just share some simple concepts in those 4 opportunities. Again, gang, if you don't download this free, how easy can it be if it's free? Someone's saying, can you drop it around? No, you have to go get it. It doesn't get any easier. You just go on to tanselali.com. You'll see the free download there. Make sure you do it. And if you get the opportunity to do TEDx Docklands, 20th of February, it's a great event. I can tell you, as someone who spoke at it and sat in the audience and sort of retained some of the information, made some connections there. Some of the guests we've had on this program, Jonathan Creek, Nick Brax, were from connections at that particular event. So it is a great one. This is a world-class memory champion, but he's also a world-class thought leader and giver. So Tansel, on behalf of everyone at Voices of Value, thank you for the gift of your time and the gift of your knowledge, and more importantly, helping us remember more things. Pete, what are we doing next? I forgot.
I think we better say goodbye. Thanks, Tansel. Really appreciate it. Good stuff.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, mate.
Craig.
Stephen Craig.
We trust you enjoyed listening to Voices of Value, a shared conversation between Rick Rushton, Peter Kakos, and their valued guests. Their views are not necessarily those of the wider world, but they should be. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or your preferred podcast source, and we love to hear both your feedback and ratings on the content we provide. Additional information can be sourced through our website, voicesofvaluepodcast.com. Join the conversation again next week when Peter and Rick continue the search for truth, justice, and the value-added way.